An abandoned amusement park stood deep in the forest, hidden from view by dense undergrowth. The once bright signs were now covered in rust, the figures on the carousels were faded, and the overgrown paths had almost completely disappeared under a layer of dry leaves. 4 children, Max, Lisa, Oli, and Jake, made their way through the undergrowth, curiously examining the remains of the old ride. They had heard that the park had closed a long time ago after an accident that no one liked to talk about. "Wow," Lisa whispered, stopping in front of the carousel. The old ride towered in the middle of the square, surrounded by a rusty fence. The figures of horses were frozen in eternal motion, crooked, peeling with empty eye sockets where glass eyes had once been. Max came closer, ran his hand over the cold metal. "It's like she's alive," he muttered. Oli snorted. "Yeah, right. It's just a bunch of rusty iron." But then something clicked. A slow creaking sound filled the air. The horses jerked. The carousel started itself. Without electricity, without a start button, the horses began to move in time with an invisible music that no one could hear. "How?" Lisa stepped back, grabbing Jake's hand, but Max was staring at the carousel, mesmerized. And when one of the horses froze in front of him, he reached out and grabbed the cold crossbar. "Max, no!" Lisa screamed, but he was already mounting the horse. The carousel didn't wait. The mechanism sped up, and when Max tried to jump off, the horse squeezed his legs tightly. The carousel sped faster, and the children outside began to notice them. Figures sitting on other horses, those who had ridden here before and had never been able to get off. Max screamed, trying to pull his legs free, but the horse's metal paws held him tight. The carousel was picking up speed. "Get off it!" Lisa screamed, but her voice was broken by terror. Max tried to unclench his fingers from the cold crossbar, but his hands wouldn't obey. It was as if they had grown into the metal. And then Oli noticed the other riders. At first he thought they were just peeling figures of mannequins, but as the carousel spun past them, he saw faces, eyes full of terror, mouths open in silent screams, children who had once sat here and could never leave. "We have to stop it," Jake screamed, rushing toward the mechanism. He grabbed the lever, but it didn't move. The carousel continued to speed up. Max was pale, his eyes went empty and his movements slowed. He was becoming part of the carousel. "We can't lose him," Lisa sobbed. But then there was a thud. Max was gone, just gone. The horse he had been riding was empty now. The metal looked smoother, newer, as if the carousel had absorbed it. Lisa slowly looked up. There was a boy they didn't know now on one of the horses. Old, with faded eyes, in tattered clothes. "Who is it?" Oli whispered. The carousel didn't stop. It was looking for the next one. Lisa, Oli, and Jake stood there in shock, unable to believe what had happened. Max was gone, just gone, as if he had never existed, but they knew. They had watched his body dissolve, become part of something bigger. And now, as the carousel made another full turn, there was a new rider on one of the horses. A boy with a pale face, with faded eyes. He is. Oli clenched his fists. "It's not Max." But Lisa already knew the answer. It was someone else. The one who was here before. The carousel took one rider and released another, and now it was looking for the next. Jake was the first to scream. The horse next to him jerked, its metal eyes flashing with living light. He didn't have time to run. Oli grabbed Lisa's hand but felt something cold squeeze his wrist. The horses were coming to life. Their heads turned to follow the children, their mouths twisted into an eerie semblance of a smile, and then it was all gone. The darkness swallowed them. At dawn, the abandoned park was just as empty and forgotten. The carousel no longer turned. It stood still, waiting for new guests. And on each horse there were new dolls now. Their faces were too detailed, too alive, too familiar. But no one would ever know that these dolls remembered everything and were waiting for the next ones.